Disneyland, the happiest place on earth. Countless families pile into an air-conditioned theater for a patriotic theater show, complete with cheerful animal audio animatronics. But this isn't an ordinary day at Disneyland. Death stalks this theater within its moving walls, and soon it will claim a life. But it won't be the first shocking death at this beloved theme park, and it won't be the last. These are the most horrific deaths at Disneyland on this episode of the Infographics Show. Number 13. The Hyperion Theatre. Let's kick off with the only death ever at Disneyland's younger, messier sibling, Disney's California Adventure. This California-themed park was a disaster when it opened, due to strange theming and a lack of A-list rides. Since then, Pixar and other A-list IPs have swooped in to save the day, rebranding the place as a thrill-seeker's paradise. One feature that stayed since the park opened is the Hyperion Theatre, a massive musical and movie stage that hosts the park's live entertainment. Ironically, it is this beloved theater that witnessed the most horrific incident in the park's history. The audience might be safe, but the same can't be said for the people on stage. It was April 2003 when a stage technician was hard at work prepping the theater for the current entertainment. Suddenly, he plunged 60 feet from a catwalk and was critically injured. He was rushed to the hospital but never regained consciousness and died a month later. The investigation found Disney's safety protocols at fault, and the company was fined $18,350 for violations. A sum so small, Walt's ghost probably fished it out of the couch cushions. But it wouldn't be the only time the company was found at fault. But it's not just rides that can prove fatal. Number 12. New Orleans Square. Disneyland's New Orleans Square is where shopping meets spooky. It was the first new land added after the park opened and is now a fan favorite, thanks to legends like Haunted Mansion and Pirates of the Caribbean. But it wasn't any of those attractions that claimed the life of a 60-year-old employee, Bonnie Mavis Lear. The California resident was hard at work riding a golf cart around the park to her place of work in summer 2024 when things went horribly wrong. Because even in the happiest place on earth, one wrong move can be deadly. While approaching the Club 33 restaurant, Lear lost her balance and tumbled out of the moving cart. She hit her head directly on the sidewalk, which caused a critical brain injury. She was transported to the nearby hospital and was comatose for 2 days before passing away. This was likely just a freak accident caused by a hit to the head, which could have happened anywhere. But the fact that it happened in the middle of a theme park in front of countless guests made it national news. It wasn't the only case where one wrong step proved fatal, but Disney didn't come off well in this next one. Number 11. Jungle Cruise. The Jungle Cruise at Disneyland is one of the gentler rides, a slow-moving boat ride through a rainforest river, complete with audio animatronic animals and a wise-cracking river guide. It seemed like an ideal ride for a 66-year-old Joanne Aguilar, who came to the park in a wheelchair accompanied by her adult daughters. But when it came time to board the ride, the wheelchair-accessible boats weren't available. Aguilar decided to get on anyway, struggling to get inside with limited mobility. But she settled in to enjoy the ride. It was getting out that was the problem. When Aguilar attempted to exit, she took a nasty fall and broke her leg. She was transported to the hospital and spent 10 days there before heading to a rehabilitation center, but never fully recovered. She would die in less than 6 months after the 2021 injury from an infection. Her daughters filed a lawsuit against Disneyland claiming the park's negligence put their mother in serious danger. It also accuses Disneyland employees of laughing at their mother rather than helping as she struggled to exit. The lawsuit is still pending, but it's a nasty PR blow Disney definitely didn't want. But Disney can't always account for what's already there. Number 10. Indiana Jones Adventure. The Indiana Jones Adventure is one of the biggest new attractions to be added to Disney in the late 20th century. It's a wild, thrilling ride that puts riders in a Jeep with Indy as they escape rolling boulders and temple curses. And when we say wild, we mean it. It gives the visitor quite a shake. For most, that's part of the excitement, but the ride warns that people with health conditions shouldn't get on board. The problem is, that's not always obvious at first glance. And things like heart defects and blood clots can be lurking in a person without them having any idea. And that is exactly what happened to one woman in June 2000. The 23-year-old exited the ride complaining of a nasty headache. After leaving the park, she went to the hospital, and it turned out she had suffered a brain hemorrhage. She died 2 months later of an aneurysm, and her family blamed Disney. They claimed that the ride's shaking had caused the brain bleed, while Disney stated it must have been a pre-existing condition. After failing to get the lawsuit initially dismissed, Disney wound up settling the case without admitting fault for an undisclosed sum. There have been no future deaths on the ride in the 20-plus years since, although the attorney hired says he's won 2 other cases for brain injuries on this exact ride. So anyone leaving with a headache is probably sweating a bit more. But in one case, a guest didn't even have to get inside the park to meet their end. Number 9. Disney Monorail. 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 If you now have that song in your head, you're not alone. And hey, it's technically a Disney song now. Forget Ogdenville or North Haverbrook. Disney's Monorail is the OG, shuttling hordes to the magic daily. It's generally one of the safest ways to travel, with the fast-moving trains operating on a fixed track. As long as people obey the safety regulations, they'll be in the park in minutes. But let's be real, when did young people and smart choices ever go hand in hand? Thomas Guy Cleveland found that out the hard way. The 19-year-old from Northbridge wanted to go to Disneyland on June 17, 1966. But maybe he didn't have the money, or maybe he was just foolhardy. But he decided to take a shortcut by climbing onto the monorail track, then following it to the entryway. There was just one problem: the huge train barreling down on him. The security officer tried to warn him off, but Cleveland either didn't notice or was too stubborn to stop. He was hit by the train and dragged under it, suffering fatal injuries in one of the first deaths at the theme park. And there is just something about Disney transportation that makes people make bad decisions. Number 8. Disney People Mover. Disneyland is a busy place and people need somewhere to cool off and relax. Enter the People Mover, a relaxing ride through Tomorrowland, perfect for park views and a breather. Safest ride in the park as long as you don't get the bright idea to hop out mid-journey. No surprise, the people least likely to obey these instructions are teenagers, and there were multiple incidents, including one girl who fell 30 feet while trying to retrieve her mouse ears cap in 1972. She survived with serious injuries and went on to sue Disney for not putting guardrails on the tracks, although the suit was unsuccessful. These other 2 teens weren't so lucky. Less than a month after the ride opened in 1967, 15-year-old Ricky Lee Yama tried to jump between 2 People Mover cars in a darkened tunnel. After stumbling on the tracks, he was hit by an arriving train and dragged several hundred feet, killing him. History repeated itself in 1980, when an 18-year-old, Geraldo Gonzalez, tried the exact same stunt in the exact same spot and was also killed. The People Mover wound up being one of Disneyland's deadliest attractions until it was closed to make room for the short-lived Rocket Rods thrill ride. Fans want it back, and hey, so do we, as long as Disney's ready to plaster it with safety signs. Of course, we can't leave Tomorrowland without talking about its most thrilling attractions. Number 7. Space Mountain. A chilling roller coaster through a dark space-themed pyramid amid a sea of flashing stars. Space Mountain is one of those rides that is only for the brave, so it's no surprise that there have been plenty of accidents there over the years. People have recklessly climbed out of the cars and been seriously injured. But there has only been one death, and it took a bizarre series of events. In 1979, a 31-year-old woman became sick after her ride on the mountain and wasn't able to exit the vehicle. Employees told her to stay in her seat until help could be summoned, but no one told the ride operator because he proceeded to send the sick woman through the ride a second time. After another bumpy ride in the blackness of space, the woman arrived back at the loading dock having passed out. She was taken to a nearby hospital where she slipped into a coma, dying a week later. It was a medical mystery. Did the ride truly kill her? The autopsy ultimately showed that she had a heart tumor that had been shaken loose and entered her brain, causing a fatal medical event. It likely would have happened at some point, so Disney was blameless, except for giving a dying woman one final thrill ride by accident. That's enough roller coasters for a while. Let's go for something a little gentler. Number 6. Rivers of America. The Rivers of America are a relaxing spot in Disney, home to Tom Sawyer Island, an interactive play area for younger guests. Visitors take a ferry back and forth to the remote location, and in 1973, an 18-year-old guest and his 10-year-old brother enjoyed it a little too much. They hid in a crew-only area to avoid detection and decided to stay after closing time. There was just one problem. They now had no way off, so they decided to swim back, but the younger boy didn't know how to swim. The older boy tried to carry his brother on his back, but drowned halfway through, with the younger boy miraculously surviving by doggy paddling until he was found. And it wouldn't be the only time teenage bad judgment claimed a life here. 10 years later, a New Mexico teen celebrating graduation thought, why not steal a rubber boat and hit the river? Armed with liquid courage but zero boating skills, he learned the hard way that alcohol and teenagers may lead to bravery, but it doesn't lead to good boating skills. The boat capsized, the unfortunate teenager drowned, and his mother sued. The lawsuit was unsuccessful because Disney argued they shouldn't need additional warning signs for "Please do not steal our boats while drunk." And not even the safer ways of traveling the river are free of danger. Number 5. Sailing Ship Colombia. Another popular way of relaxing in Disneyland, the sailing ship Colombia is a full-sized replica of a famous ship that circumnavigated the globe. It travels around the rivers of America on a 12-minute voyage, which is very popular with tired guests. At least it's usually relaxing, except on December 24, 1986. On that fateful day, as guests were preparing to board, a cleat used to secure the ship to the dock tore loose, unleashing a metal object at full speed, directly toward the guests waiting in line. And one family would take the brunt of the hit. Both Luan Phi Dawson and his wife Liu Thuy Vuong were hit in the head, and park employee Christine Carpenter also suffered injuries. Dawson turned out to have suffered a critical head injury, being removed from life support 2 days later. This was one of the clearest cases yet of Disney being fully at fault in an incident, and they wound up settling a lawsuit with the family to the tune of $25 million. Disney was also forced to make some serious safety changes as part of the settlement. These include allowing faster access for outside medical personnel and bringing in specialized workers trained specifically for attractions like this one. Now let's return to the park's wildest roller coasters for some of its darkest incidents. Number 4. Matterhorn Bobsleds. The park's oldest roller coaster, and definitely its wildest. The Matterhorn Bobsled sends guests rocketing through an artificial mountain at breakneck speeds, complete with an encounter with a terrifying Yeti. The ride is fairly infamous for being rough, leading many people to complain of backaches. But some people have suffered worse ailments or even not come off at all. Less than 10 years after the ride opened, a 15-year-old boy from Long Beach named Mark Maples was killed after standing up mid-ride and falling out of the fast-moving sled. But Disney was found to be likely blameless here. Maples' seatbelt had come undone, either by the boy himself or by his seatmate. But there was another incident on the bobsleds that was even more horrific. In 1984, Dolly Regine Young got on the bobsleds and didn't get off. When the car returned to the track, she was missing, and her seatmates in front didn't notice her disappearance. A quick search found her. She had been thrown from the bobsled, hit by another speeding sled, and decapitated. Disney investigated, and it turned out that the 48-year-old woman had not been buckled in. No one could answer if it was a mechanical error, ride attendant error, or if the unfortunate 48-year-old woman had undone her seatbelt herself, leading to her gruesome end. But even this isn't called the wildest ride in the wilderness. Number 3. Big Thunder Mountain Railroad. A wild and woolly Western-themed roller coaster in Frontierland, Big Thunder takes riders on a runaway mine train through an exploding mine shaft. While it's family-friendly, it is known for being rough enough to knock kidney stones loose from those suffering from the painful ailment. Talk about a rootin' remedy. The ride has also had multiple incidents over the years, including a boy's foot being injured by the train and a crash at the station. But the only fatal incident happened in 2003, when one of the famous mine trains set out from the station and proceeded to derail. In one of the most catastrophic maintenance failures in Disney's history, the train went off the tracks and crashed. 10 riders were injured, and 22-year-old Marcelo Torres was killed, suffering blunt force chest trauma and internal bleeding. An investigation uncovered a shocking chain of mechanical failures and improper maintenance, leading to a devastating collision between the train car and the front locomotive. The impact caused the first car to collapse into the passengers, resulting in life-altering injuries and a tragic loss of life. The ride would be closed for over 6 months, and a lawsuit was ultimately settled for an undisclosed sum. And sometimes all it takes is one incident to land a ride, a place in infamy. Number 2. Roger Rabbit's Cartoon Spin. Mickey's Toontown is one of the most light-hearted areas at Disneyland, dedicated to meet and greets with iconic characters and family-friendly rides. For a long time, the flagship attraction here was Roger Rabbit's Cartoon Spin, a dark ride through the wacky world of the 1988 animated hybrid film. With its fast-moving cars and quirky scenes, this ride has long been a favorite of kids. But for 4-year-old Brandon Zucker, a simple ride turned tragic in 1990 as he reached down to grab something he dropped. Brandon fell from the vehicle and was promptly dragged under the car. He was pinned under the heavy vehicle, being seriously injured. He suffered a cardiac arrest, which caused brain damage in the 10 minutes it took for emergency operators to get there. Brandon would never fully recover from his injuries and died in 2009. The investigation put the blame on Disney, indicating that Brandon had been placed in the wrong seat, too close to the opening. Disney would settle the lawsuit against it in 2002 and agreed to change its emergency protocol to call 911 before Disney security. But the one thing Disney didn't do in the lawsuit? Officially admit fault in the accident. But no incident at a Disneyland attraction was more horrific than this one. Number 1. America Sings. The year was 1974, and Disneyland was replacing their long-running Carousel of Progress attraction with a new stage show, America Sings. This jaunty show used a unique rotating theater with moving walls and featured singing animal audio animatronics. It was going to be perfect for the upcoming bicentennial, but only days into its operation, horror would descend on the theater. On July 9th, 18-year-old attraction hostess Deborah Gale Stone was backstage after a show had begun, trying to move from one scene to another, and as she made her move, the walls moved with her. No one is sure exactly what happened next, but Stone wound up out of the safe area and wound up pinned between the rotating walls, being crushed to death. Audience members heard her screaming backstage and notified the staff, but others thought it was part of the show. After Stone's body was recovered, her parents sued and received a small settlement. The attraction reopened only 3 days after the horrific event, as Disney determined there was no mechanical error behind the accident. They added new safety protocols, but the show continued to run for another 14 years. If you asked some people, it gave the Haunted Mansion a run for its money as the most haunted building in Disneyland. So what do you think is the most shocking incident in Disneyland history? Have any close calls from your own trips? Share them in the comments. Now go watch The Sinister Secrets of Disney, or check out how Disney World became its own government for a look at how Disneyland's Florida cousin maintains an even tighter grip over its borders.